Hey there, history enthusiasts! Welcome back to the channel. If you're fascinated by history of all kinds, you're in the right place. Today, we're diving into the story of the Great Irish Potato Famine, a pivotal event that reshaped Ireland forever. I'm ready if you're ready, so let's get into it, shall we? The Great Irish Famine, also known as the Potato Famine and the Great Hunger, occurred between 1845 and 1852 in Ireland. It was one of the most severe disasters in Irish history, both in terms of mortality and its social and political impact. The immediate cause of the famine was a potato disease known as late blight, caused by the organism Phytophthora infestans. This pathogen arrived in Europe from the Americas in the early 1840s, reaching Ireland by 1845. When the blight hit, it rapidly destroyed the potato plants, which were the staple diet for a large proportion of the population. The blight recurred in several subsequent years, leading to widespread crop failures. The Irish population was exceptionally dependent on the potato for several reasons. It was highly nutritious and could be grown efficiently in poor soil conditions prevalent in Ireland. The poorest were most vulnerable to the blight, as they had no alternative sources of food or income. For many poor tenants and smallholders, potatoes were the only feasible crop that could be grown in sufficient quantities to feed a family on the small plots of land available to them. The structure of land ownership and tenancy in Ireland only exacerbated the crisis. Much of the land was owned by absentee landlords who lived in Britain and leased their land to local agents, who then sublet it to small tenant farmers. These tenants often lived on marginal land and relied on potatoes because they needed to produce high yields from small plots to pay their rents. The response of the British government to the Great Irish Famine has been a subject of significant historical debate, largely criticised for being ineffective and inadequate. Early in the famine, the British government, led by Sir Robert Peel, took some proactive measures. Peel secretly arranged for the import of maize, corn, from America. This corn was intended to be sold at low prices to alleviate the food shortages. Peel also repealed the Corn Laws, which had imposed tariffs on grain imports, thus lowering the price of food in general. The government established soup kitchens and relief works, public works projects designed to provide employment. At the peak in 1847, these soup kitchens were feeding over 3 million people daily. However, the government soon shifted the responsibility for famine relief to the local districts in Ireland and the landlords, which proved to be a disastrous decision, as many of these local authorities were unable to fund adequate relief efforts. The existing workhouse system, part of the Poor Law extension to Ireland in 1838, became overwhelmed during the famine. Workhouses were supposed to offer shelter and food in exchange for work. However, they quickly became overcrowded and conditions were harsh and unsanitary, leading to widespread disease and high mortality rates among the inhabitants. In 1846, a new government led by Lord John Russell came to power, which was less sympathetic than Peel's administration. Russell's government firmly believed in a minimalist intervention in economic matters. The government halted the selling of maize at a subsidized price and phased out the soup kitchens, insisting instead on facilitating public works as the main form of relief, which often were ineffective and poorly managed. British economic policies also contributed to the severity of the famine. Ireland was a net exporter of food, yet during the famine, food continued to be exported at high rates. economic policy dictated by the prevailing laissez-faire ideology limited government intervention in markets, including the grain market, even as the famine worsened. The most immediate and devastating impact of the famine was on Ireland's population. Between 1845 and 1852, it is estimated that around 1 million people died from starvation and famine-related diseases. Moreover, the famine triggered mass emigration, primarily to the United States, Canada, Britain, and Australia, with another 1 million people leaving Ireland within a decade. The famine resulted in a dramatic population reduction due to death and emigration. Ireland's population fell from about 8.2 million in 1841 to around 6.6 million by 1851. Since then, it has never fully recovered from the famine, with the population living on the island decreasing with every census until the late 20th century. And even now, the population of the island is less than that in the mid-1840s. The famine accelerated a change in the Irish economy and social structure. The economic devastation led to significant changes in land ownership and usage. Post-famine, there was a shift from arable to pastoral farming, which required less labour. This, combined with ongoing emigration, led to a decrease in the demand for agricultural labour, transforming the rural economy and leading to further urbanization. The famine disrupted traditional rural communities, which were the strongholds of Irish language and culture. This contributed to the decline of the Irish language. The rural areas where Irish was predominantly spoken suffered some of the highest rates of mortality and emigration. The breakdown of these communities weakened the transmission of the language to future generations. Furthermore, in a post-famine Ireland, English was increasingly viewed as the language of social mobility and economic opportunity, particularly in urban areas where many Irish relocated in search of work. The famine profoundly intensified anti-British sentiment among the Irish population. Many Irish people viewed the British government's response to the famine as inadequate and negligent. Policies that allowed for the continued export of food from Ireland during the famine, combined with insufficient relief efforts, were seen as evidence of British indifference or even malice towards the Irish. The perceived inadequacy of the British government's response to the famine fueled a growing Irish nationalism. The anger and resentment towards British rule contributed significantly to the push for Irish independence. This sentiment eventually led to the Easter Rising in 1916, the Irish War of Independence. In 1921, negotiations between British authorities and Irish leaders led to the signing of the Anglo-Irish Treaty. The treaty established the Irish Free State as a dominion within the British Empire, similar in status to Canada and Australia at the time. It provided Ireland with self-governance in all matters except foreign policy and defence, which remained under British control. The Irish Free State was officially established on December 6, 1922. It remained a dominion of the British Empire until 1937, when a new constitution was adopted, and the nation reconstituted itself as Ireland, Éire, declaring itself a fully sovereign state. In 1949, Ireland formally became a republic and left the British Commonwealth. And that's all for today's video. Thank you so much for stopping by and hanging with me. If you ever want to delve within the deep riches of historical texts again, don't forget to like and subscribe for some more history, I guess.